So Clare Parry was the original founder and chair of Passivhaus Australia. So going back in time, and a Passivhaus designer and certifier.
That is right. Yep. You ready for me to kick off?
Yep, go for it.
Wonderful. I'm sorry I can't be with you there in person. Particularly sorry I can't see the rest of the presenters. You've got a fantastic lineup. But I'm here today to share with you the Passivhaus Playbook, which I'm sure many of you will have actually seen already. And as I've been preparing this presentation, I've been reflecting on how the Passivhaus Playbook really came to be and what we've solved in the time since it's been published. So really the playbook, and it's downloadable for free. Use Google to find it. It's available on Introba's website, and I think also on the Passivhaus Association's website. It's a 9-step pathway that covers everything from, it really tries to encapsulate the process of delivering a passive house. And one thing that I was very happy about when we prepared the playbook was that it told us nothing new. And as you read it, you'll probably sort of go, is that it? And it really is a tool that you can lean on to actually make delivering passive house projects easier. And that's all it was ever intended to be. And in preparation of this presentation, sort of reflecting on the lessons that we learned as we prepared it, and the lessons that I've learned from my time working in Passive House. So it's a single piece of work in a journey over 15 years. Sorry, just trying to get my presentation to advance. There we go. What we did to prepare the playbook, we took one of the projects we were actually working on. So in my day job at Development Victoria, we aren't able to share which project this was. We actually still haven't built it, which is probably one of the things I'm a bit disappointed about. But it was never really about the project. It was about delivering on a project vision. And for this particular apartment building, it was a sustainable development that's integrated with its community, provides user-focused, affordable living and opportunities for a diverse population that will inhabit it. But it was intended to capture, what it would take to deliver any passive house project, and what that passive house project would then mean for that community that got to occupy it. So we were looking at affordable living, we're looking at quality and innovation, we're looking at integrated, sustainable, human-focused outcomes. And I'm preaching to the converted here, and you all know that that's exactly what Passive House delivers in spades. Development Victoria has a sustainability strategy with 3 pillars, and those are those icons there on the bottom left. It's about delivering best practice. That means many different things. It's about being carbon neutral by 2030, which is our very ambitious timeframe for our portfolio. And it's about investing in transformation. So not just doing it for ourselves, but finding ways to make that mean something for the sector and to bring everyone along with us. And we all know that Passive House ticks all of those boxes. It is best practice. It always has, I guess, encapsulated everything that best practice means. For us, we've got about 20 different things that sit under that heading. It's about, indoor environment quality. It's about energy efficiency. It's about that complete sustainable picture. Passive House isn't all of those things. We've got water, we've got healthy materials, but it helps us tick a lot of those boxes. And carbon and transformation were very much key to that. I've drawn out 3 key lessons from this entire premise. And one of them is, please remember that the why is never about the Passive House. Passive House is, I guess, the answer to all the questions we have, to all the ambitions we have for our project. We want thermal comfort. We want something that's fantastic to live in, that makes us healthier, that brings us well-being, that represents a return on investment, and, has energy efficiency attached to it as well. I've worked on all of these projects in Australia. One of these is my home in the bottom sort of middle there. They told us that it was possible. It's always been possible. So we know that it's suitable for Australia. We know that our climate isn't the challenge. It's actually something that, Passive House is still the solution for all of the climates across Australia. The project we were working on is a build to rent, or BTR. So we know that it's suitable for that. We've actually got under our best practice list, so I mentioned there's a list of things, we list Passive House. We know that Passive House is what we want. It's listed in our minimum requirements. Across the world, this data is now a bit old, so there's 120,000 at least precedents for Passive House building. And it's kind of, that Australian marketing campaign that we had about 15 years ago. Where the bloody hell are they? So we know it's possible. So we brought together a bit of a crack team, and we really wanted to answer the question, what would it take us to get from where we are today to there being Passive House certified outcomes within our entire portfolio? Who would it take? When do we need them? What do we need them to do? How much is it going to cost? Which bits of the problem do we attack? And maybe if we need to take steps to get there, what would those steps look like? The team was pretty comprehensive. The key ones I want to draw out here are the Introba team, so the sustainability team. They're really highly skilled. We had a cast of hundreds across my organisation because we wanted to bring everyone on that journey. We didn't want to leave this as a sustainability problem. We had a fire engineer, we had a structural engineer. Importantly, we had a quantity surveyor or a cost planner. And we also had a contractor. Built is one of Australia's biggest contractors. So rather than just keeping this as a theoretical proposition, we wanted to bring them into the room and say, if you were doing this, what would you do? How much will it cost? Can your people do it? And how much of a challenge is it going to be to bring along all those sub-trades? It's a pretty simple question, or a pretty simple proposition. Develop a process that would be technically feasible, buildable, and cost-effective. And all of those were really, really important. Introba was fantastic in that they brought to this a regenerative mindset. And that was something that I think brought an extra fabulous layer to this. So it was not looking at how do we solve this problem, but how do we unlock all the potential that we know exists. And the playbook is 9 steps. We distilled it down to these. I think each one of these steps is essential. What we did as well, which is really important, is we started with a blank sheet of paper. We didn't try to retrofit or shoehorn in change to existing processes. We started with the end in mind. And then we went back and looked at what does business as usual look like, and really what is it that we've changed. So we made sure that we didn't think about business as usual until we got to the end, and then started to figure out what it was about our current practices we might need to adapt rather. So we took a design and we explored all of the things we might need to interrogate across building form, building envelope, building services, and then actually realising this project on the ground with the men with the hammers and the nails, and the project managers, etc. I'm not going to dig too deep into the playbook itself. It's, as I mentioned, freely downloadable, worth a read. It is 9 key steps. Within those steps, we've got the key actions that you need to take, and the benefits that get unlocked in each of those phases, and the impacts on the program and the cost. It is meant to be really, really simple, and it's meant to be fairly universal no matter what the project. For our particular project, it was really important for us to understand the actual cost proposition. And we tried to be really conservative. One thing I will say though is, even in the time since we've done this, so this was roughly 2 years ago, that proposition of how much these things will cost has changed dramatically. But one thing I still believe is that the cost premium will still be roughly the same. So the industry has moved. Everything that has changed in the industry should not change too much, that cost premium. But I guess don't try and recreate this, you'll never be able to. this really blunt assessment of, I guess that CapEx on the left and, a little bit around the OpEx on the right, it was really blunt assessment, and it really doesn't recognise the full value proposition of passive house, such as maintenance, durability, really the longevity of the product and how much that might be appreciated and given value by those who occupy it. My second lesson, and this one has come from spending this week assessing payback for a project, is really payback. Like, I'm sick of talking about the dollars and the cost proposition up front. This has been true throughout my career. Payback is the evil cousin of energy savings. And I wish people would stop talking about that, because a passive house, and I'm really glad to say I live in one, is never, ever about payback. Nobody's ever had to assess the payback or net present value of marble bench tops or en suites or walk-in robes or butler's pantries or swimming pools or spas or two-car garages. And there's a long, long list, and I'm sure you'll all agree with me that we're just kind of sick of talking about, the payback of a ventilation system, or the energy savings from a particular window change. It doesn't mean that people will stop asking, unfortunately, but really the cost proposition and the headline, or the value proposition and the headlines you must seek are those about climate resilience and comfort and health and, less cleaning and structural durability, and really the value. And, my son, we've lived in this house for 5 years. He hasn't been really sick at all. And as my friends this winter have talked about their kids getting flu and, their whole family's being wiped out from respiratory illnesses, I've got this little kid who won't get sick, and I'd pay for that again and again and again. So these things are hard to attribute dollar benefit to. So just really back to the playbook and what it helps us to set in place this process. And even at Development Victoria, we haven't necessarily got this right, but we'll continue to re-examine our programs and our investment cases. One of the hardest things to change is the business as usual processes of the people who run the spreadsheets. Before a pen hits paper on a project, it's the people who are unlocking the investment case. We need to make sure that we get that investment case right. We need to keep building capacity in all the people who establish projects, in all the people who design, everyone who's involved in getting that up and running with the right foot forward. So keep building capacity. Getting the right amount of time up front. It might take a little bit longer to get the design right. Design sprints are, a bit of an awful thing to do for a passive house project, unless you've got a really highly skilled team. We need to relentlessly build the relationships, capability and capacity, not just inside our organisations, but outside it as well. Calling your ventilation, supplier, and always knowing what kind of units they've got on hand, on the way, what kind of products are emerging in the industry. Working on the messaging, health versus energy. Energy, super important, but health and all the outcomes that can flow from delivering better outcomes is really, really important. And some of those conversations are really starting to land, particularly in the social housing and affordable housing worlds. We need to keep having those conversations because it helps break down the silos of investment. So when we deliver, we might spend more delivering a project, but what we find is that if we're saving money and it's hitting the health sector, then us having that conversation with those people is one of the most important things we can do. As a government agency, we are in the position to invest in upskilling local industry. That's a really privileged position, and that's something we will continue to work on. We want to continue to invest in our trades. We work with other parts of government to make sure that we are attacking the right parts of the industry when we talk about things like improving the double glazing sector, we need to go and have a chat with our friends at Sustainability Victoria to talk about what they might be able to do as they invest in, the economic benefits that they are looking at with the manufacturing industries. Telling the stories, the good ones, the bad ones, and the really ugly ones. Otherwise, what happens is the ugly ones permeate, unfortunately. But if you can start to draw them out and start to talk about why these things might have happened, maybe it wasn't Passive House that actually was the cause of a building going mouldy, but that's the story that will permeate industry and if the rumor mill keeps flying. Whereas what you can do is start to unpack those stories and really make sure that the proper processes were followed, and that we all learn from all those things. And closing that loop as well is really, really important, and using those stories. So establishing the value proposition to build it into the next investment case. And one thing I will say is that we want to make sure that we get the value from a brand perspective as well. One thing I'm working really hard on helping our organisation understand is that this is something that we can use to leverage, the value of delivering better dwellings, better projects, or climate resilient projects. That is something that if government was known for doing that, that is something that we can really benefit from. So when we started talking about the Passive House Playbook, I guess we were telling a story about a project that we might have started from scratch. The reality is that this wasn't our first Passive House project. So even as we started doing the work to prepare it, we'd already learnt from projects 1 and 2. We were able to see what was different. We were able to understand what we'd done wrong. We're able to use the data we had from those projects and leverage all of that. And one thing I really hope is that we can use that to take it across the entire portfolio, no matter what the typology. These are apartment buildings, but we're looking at visitor centres and art galleries and houses and office buildings and all other kinds of projects that we have on our books. The conversation often lands by chance. So the building capacity conversation is one that takes an immense amount of patience. And that's not just a learning from the playbook process, but from 20 years of working in sustainability. And since we started the Passive House Association in Australia in 2011, it's all those little conversations that eventually start to become more sophisticated. They start to snowball. You start to hear about projects that back when we started, I knew every single project on the ground in Australia, but I'm so happy to say that I have no idea what's going on out there anymore, because they just they keep popping up everywhere, which is fantastic. The sector in Australia is incredibly challenged. One of the problems we're dealing with at the moment is that everybody is insanely risk averse. Costs have escalated, as I mentioned. A lot of cost planners aren't doing the legwork. We are being told that building a passive house will attract a 20% premium, and we just know that that is, among other things, entirely false. The building code has moved. The products are more available than they were before. The sector is moving along in leaps and bounds. The construction code has moved along, and that's something that we, as the high performance sector, should be incredibly proud of, that the building codes are starting to recognise things like air tightness and thermal bridging. The only way we can move through this phase and to bring costs down is to actually build these projects and to show them. And that is, I guess, a responsibility that Development Victoria takes quite seriously, that investing in transformation, our mandate is to actually step in where the market is failing to deliver. That's what the government is meant to do. If the market was doing it, they wouldn't need us. So this is one of the things that we are very proud of. As I prepared for this presentation, I did reflect on how far we've actually come in Australia. And my favourite passive house building in Melbourne is one that most people actually don't know about, even though it's about 9 years old now. This is the Wade Institute. And so thinking back to when we were delivering this building, it felt like we were so alone, we were way out on our own. I learnt the most from this project. I met my favourite people. It was driven by the architecture team. It wasn't driven by me as the lonely consultant. This is the project, which is the reason I created my consultancy at the time. I was on site, I touched the products, I saw how they worked, I learned from some of my heroes in the Australian industry. The old men who told me I was wrong, the builders on site who said, you know, this is nonsense, what the hell is this thing? And I watched them find out that that I wasn't wrong, that they turned up on site in the middle of winter and this building was nice and warm inside, even though it wasn't even finished yet. It's a fantastic example of how far we've come and what we've got to learn from. It's not a perfect building. It wasn't certified, but it's still fantastic. And my favourite photo from the project, ignore the insulation, that's not actually the lesson. We all learned so much from it. The contractor, you know, coming in and putting in a whole makeup air system because they just assumed that we were wrong, that mechanical ventilation with heat recovery was a bit of a weird idea. They had to remove it, of course, but we all learned a lot, and you know, what they assumed was incorrect. So we've seen an entire sector come so far, and we know there's still more to go, but we're still here and we're still pushing really hard, and the sector is growing, going ahead in leaps and bounds. So the Passive House Playbook, I hope it becomes something that people can learn from. It's a little old book that's meant to help build capacity. It's meant to help project teams understand how they should support building of that capacity, put time and money into your projects, learn how to recognise value and not just cost. Continue to build awareness inside and outside your project teams. Build capacity in your stakeholders and in the sector overall. So my last lesson that I wanted to share with you is that it takes all of us. And it always has, and it will continue to. Be patient. Every effort matters, even if it might feel wasted in the short term. I know of 50-story passive house towers that are in design. It feels very far from when we were designing the very first house in rural South Australia way back in 2011. There are so many people who are pushing in the right direction, and please continue to use these opportunities to come together in the passive house community. Like I said, I wish I could be there. I'm sure you're having some fantastic conversations. It would be remiss of me apologies. Not to mention these two heroes that we did lose. So please turn up, fill that gap. One thing I know, that in the absence of these two people, it's up to us to turn up, to say something, to be the ones pulling the industry in the right direction, no matter how small you think your actions are. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire, and thanks for taking time out of your Sunday afternoon to join us, even if not in person.
Thank you. Apologies, I almost kept it together at the end there, but just lost it. Thank you very much.
Thanks.